Within a few short decades after the end of the old Jim Crow, a new system emerged, and it emerged as a result of our racial anxieties, our tensions, dramatic shifts in the global economy that left suddenly hundreds of thousands of people out of work, and our response to that crisis in urban areas, our response to the wave of joblessness that afflicted segregated communities in Chicago and Philadelphia and Baltimore and Los Angeles and cities across America. Our response to that crisis wasn't a wave of care, compassion, and concern. No, our response was to end the war on poverty and to declare the war on drugs. And by declaring a war, a literal war, on poor communities of color, we've managed to create this vast new system of racial and social control through a war on drugs and a Get Tough movement, getting tough on the most vulnerable communities in our society. We have recreated a caste-like system in America. Today, in major urban areas across the country, more than half of working-age African-American men now have criminal records and are thus subject to legalized discrimination for the rest of their lives. Once swept into the criminal justice system, and of course many are swept in at early ages, often before they're even old enough to vote, once swept in and branded a criminal or a felon, you are trapped for life. You may be discriminated against for the rest of your life legally in employment, housing, access to education, and public benefits. You may be denied the right to vote, automatically excluded from juries. So many of the old forms of discrimination that we supposedly left behind during the Jim Crow era are suddenly legal again once you've been swept in and branded a criminal or felon. And the reason I think it's so important for us to shift our thinking about mass incarceration in our criminal justice system away from just thinking of it as a broken system that's in need of some reform or some tinkering, and to understanding the scope and scale of this thing and its relationship to our racial history and our racial present, is because if we continue to delude ourselves that our criminal justice system is just a little bit broken and in need of a fix here and there, a policy reform here or there, if we delude ourselves into thinking that, this system of control will continue to function well for a very, very long time. Just as in the days of slavery, we shouldn't have been talking about reforming slavery to make it a more humane system, we shouldn't be talking about reforming the system of mass incarceration. We should be talking about ending the system of mass incarceration as a whole. And we shouldn't be talking about reforming the war on drugs. We should be talking about ending the war on drugs. And so when we come to understand this system of mass incarceration is a system of racial and social control born of our divisive racial politics, born of our refusal to extend care, compassion, and concern, and our complete capitulation to punitiveness, directed at those who are most in need of our concern. When we understand that this is what it's really about, it's about our failure as a nation to truly overcome our nation's racial divisions and extend genuine care, compassion, and concern to each and every one of us, no matter who we are, where we're born, what color skin we live in. Then, and only then, I believe, can we muster the courage and the determination to do the work that is necessary, which is not more tinkering, but it's to build a movement, a bottom-up, grassroots movement to end the system of mass incarceration as a whole. The reality is that our prison population quintupled within a few short decades for reasons that had relatively little to do with crime and crime rates. And so if we were to return to the rates of incarceration we had in the 1970s or the early 1980s before the war on drugs and the Get Tough movement began, we would have to release 4 out of 5 people who are in prison today. 4 out of 5. 1 million people employed by the criminal justice system would lose their jobs. Private prison companies would be forced to watch their profits evaporate. This system is so deeply rooted now in our social, political, and economic structure that's not going to just fade away with some tinkering. We have got to do the hard work of movement building and ensure that a profound shift in our public consciousness takes place.